Good. Our sound is recording as well. Cool. Then let's start again.
Let's go again. Brilliant. I love it. Okay. All right, then I'll do another introduction.
Yes.
Shall I? Okay. What's good, everybody, and welcome to the brand review. Today we have an extra special guest. We are very excited and fortunate to have Lisa Smith from JKR on the channel today with us.
Hi guys, it's really nice to be here. I'm excited to have a chat.
For us, this is kind of a full circle moment because our first video when we first started the channel was the Burger King rebrand. So yeah, it's quite a moment for us, and it's really cool to have you here. And I would just like to ask you, what has been going on since that historic moment of being reviewed by us on the channel? No, but what's happened since the Burger King release of the rebrand?
Yeah, so that was January 2021, so a few years ago now, and it sort of marked the first sort of project that I was kind of connected to and that launched once I joined JKR and after I'd been at Chobani. And I think what was kind of really interesting about that project and about Burger King is the moment when it launched, which I joined JKR almost 2 years prior, and we'd gone through obviously the beginnings of the pandemic. It was a very large project to take on, and it didn't just start out as a rebrand project. Actually, it was very much like talking about kind of people didn't feel good about their food. They were on a journey to remove all the sort of the nasty ingredients, the artificial colors and preservatives and all the bad stuff from their food, which was for me was a really important part of the project that made me want to be part of it. You don't often come across these big brands that are almost starting to take steps to right their wrongs in terms of what they've been feeding not only Americans, but a lot of people across the world. And since then, that project, when we decided to launch it at that point in time, it was ready 6 months before, but it just wouldn't have been a right moment for all the franchisees and all the employees that were part of Burger King, because a lot of them were still working from home. It was a real drive towards digital and delivery that they'd had to expedite the sort of trajectory of how the brand was going to go in the future. And so we deliberately had delayed it till that January, and that January also marked a very political upheaving in America, on top of obviously what had already been a very kind of stressful time and year. But it was incredibly well received. I remember the Friday. I just remember, people were were just keen to see something optimistic and joyful, and it made them kind of happy. It was colorful, it was juicy, it was a little bit irreverent. So I think it was kind of the opposite of what a lot of other rebrands were doing as well, like rebranding Pfizer and medical companies at the time that were giving us all of our jabs and stuff like that. It was just it was almost the opposite of that. And it grabbed
I also read a lot of people also had a lot of nostalgia attached to it, even though the brand never actually looked like the brand that you created. Yeah. People felt like it already existed in their memory, and I think that's also some of the magic that you're looking for in the process in a rebrand in such a case.
Yeah, I mean, often we talk about when you embark on such kind of large brands that have been part of culture for so long, are you looking to the past? Are you looking to the future? It's kind of that tension that you're always going through. And whilst everybody did come out saying, oh, it's hugely nostalgic and it feels like something I've seen them do before, there was nothing in the brand identity toolkit apart from the symbol. which had come from the past. It was the colors were inspired by the layers of the Whopper, the typography had all that kind of like boldness and juiciness, and because we were really doubling down on the idea of as craveable as the food, and how do we make the whole experience of Burger King as craveable as that. And really that's, you know, since then that's gone on to obviously define what kind of distinctive assets are, these kind of iconic assets that show up across the experience, whether you're in a restaurant, whether you're receiving delivery at home, whether you're on the app, whether it's an activation, whether it's on TV, whatever channel you experience Burger King in, it's all starting to connect together, no matter which types of agencies, which types of disciplines work on it. But yeah, it took hold of culture much more than I think any of us had anticipated. We saw the stock prices rise in a very short amount of time. I've never witnessed that before on a rebrand. I've been part of a lot of very kind of some more controversial rebrands like the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So for it to be so globally positively well received, yes, of course there was, you know, bits and pieces, but that's like with any change. But on the whole, a lot of love and passion for it. It captured the design industry, but also like the advertising industry, which not normally, like the design doesn't always go to kind of our next adjacent brothers or sisters, whatever we want to call advertising. But it's like it really captured them. I think that was a lot to do with Fernando Machado, who was the CMO, who's so sort of well known in that industry. And then it went into mainstream. Like I'd never seen before. So it was a huge moment in time that not only like marked and defined, I think, JKR's own journey of transformation, which, you know, had previously done, born of sort of CPG. We love all of the work that we do with a lot of brands in those categories. Then did Duncan, which was sort of into QSR, which is quick service restaurants, for those who don't know what that means. And then Burger King, that then has now opened us up into many sort of categories. So it's defined sort of our journey of being what was once sort of a packaging company into a sort of fully rounded sort of branding agency, and then going on to work across sort of many categories. So it's been very defining for us. And I think it really helped solidify our strategy here of be distinctive everywhere, and the philosophy of that we approach all types of work and projects.
I also think it was like industry defining as well. I think, you know, back then it was like the first time that we were talking also about brands in motion. Like that became like something that we were reusing over and over again. Now it's just become like second nature. Everything that we're doing has to move. But it was the first time, I think, really, that we saw a company of such stature embracing this kind of design language, you know, and it playing out in such a simple, colorful, as you said as well, like enlightening and friendly and engaging way, that it didn't have the barrier to entry was very low. You could sit and enjoy this and have like a well-being moment whilst experiencing a brand. And I think that also drew a lot of people to it, to engage and to have those kind of, maybe, you know, that nostalgia as well. It's like, I remember how Burger King made me feel. And I think that's and that
what
point,
we were trying to encapsulate, that essence.
I think that helped to, you know, change like the way that design was perceived. And actually, and even to this day as well, you still see the repercussions of that, you know, of like the techniques and the way that you actually create things and the stories, the narrative that you were creating, that simplicity, you know, it's the thing that we're looking for. And you see, you know, brands trying to do that even today. And I think that was a really kind of poignant moment.
Yeah, I know.
And I mean, it was a pleasure to review it as well.
Oh,
yeah, one single edit. I watch it back, I'm like, oh God, cringe. Like 40 minutes of us just sat on because it was during COVID as well, just sat in my my dining room, just with one camera, like really wide angle, just talking about stuff. We were very naive, but it was great because it was very engaging.
Yeah. All right. Next question. I think we go a bit more back in time. So we watched, like we see you on stage talking. We listened to some interviews, and you realize right away that you have like a lot of passion and dedication for design. And we asked ourselves, like, is there like a moment in your life that sparked this kind of curiosity and interest in design and creativity?
Yeah, that's a big question. It's never been a linear journey for me, actually. I'm not one of those designers, which I wish I had that beautiful story where they're like, oh, the minute my mum put a pencil in my hand, I was drawing, and I was so creative from a very young age. Me and my brothers were all very sporty. My mum was always getting us outside and doing activities and doing things like that. So I love sports. I swam, I ran, I played a lot of field hockey. And then in my teenager years, I liked to party a bit more. Which was mainly because I didn't love going to school. And I'd do anything to get out of school if I could. And my mum was often called into the school going, your daughter doesn't show up for the majority of the year. Where is she? What's she up to? My mum would be like, I don't know. Why aren't you going to school? And I was a bit lost. And by the time I was after I scratched through my GCSEs, which is what you do when you're 16, those 2 years where you can carry on at school, I probably shouldn't have stayed. But I did and turned up very infrequently. I completely flunked. But somehow by the skin of my teeth got into a university to go and do sports. And I was just like, do I want to be a sports teacher? And I was just like, I don't know if I do. The only other thing that I think I liked was I was doing a craft design and technology, which was like woodworking and 3D and things like that. And I really enjoyed it, even though I hadn't actually done that exceptionally well because I wasn't going to school, which will be the case. But I really enjoyed it. And I decided to apply to do an art foundation, which is this course in England that you do if you want to go to art college eventually. It's an in-between year, which, and I think, Paul, you did that too, didn't you? But it
was one of the most influential points in my education, because I was also kind of a little bit lost. And the only thing that I knew that I loved to do was create, do stuff. And I thought that I wanted to be like a fine artist. I didn't really know what that meant. I just knew that I like to draw. And I got the opportunity to go to foundation. And I talk about this with the guys here in the studio, the German guys, and they're always like, "What? Wow, I wish something like that existed here." Such an important thing, such an important moment for anybody who's like going on their creative path, is to be given that 1 year to just try and figure out what it is you want to do in a creative space and be understood.
And very similar. It was the most defining thing I think I could have done. I remember the first classes that I did were like more fine art, drawing and painting with my hands and my feet and my elbows, and then going into textile classes, jewelry making, photo. It was the most inspiring year that I could have ever imagined. But towards the end of the third term, which it goes really fast a year, it was you had to choose, and you were meant to choose a subject that you liked doing the most and apply to go to university to do it. And I was like, I want to do fine art. And my mum was like, are you sure? I don't think you're going to make any money, which means you probably won't leave home. And I was like, I am leaving home. I want to leave home. I love my mum dearly, but I really didn't want to live where I'd lived. And I really wanted to get out into the world, I suppose. I was hungry to get out in the world. So it made me think about that. And I think the graphic design, I really had loved the tutor that had taught me graphic design in that as part of one of the subjects. But what I loved about design was it actually, design with a capital D, covers everything. So I love photography, and I went on to do that as like 40% of my specialty when I was at university. I loved that it was illustration and typography, and I could get color and textiles, and I could mix medium, all the things that I were doing in the other classes kind of under this one umbrella, which I've been thinking about it more and more recently. It's kind of the thread that carries throughout my whole career. It's how I like to curate projects now.
I think also like we also need to fly that flag, which I'm sure you're doing. But like I remember moments like going into the copy shop and photocopying things you know, to try and get textures, or taking Letraset from the art shop and messing around with things, you know. And there's just this kind of moment of tactility where you're just in your own head, trying to do stuff, trying to make mistakes, trying to create something.
Well,
And
it's making, isn't it? It's making, and that's what design is.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we have tools that recreate those, and we'd never leave we have the possibility never to leave our desks. And I think it's really important to also, I'm not saying like get back to it, but remember or to experience that at least at some point, even for younger creatives, to experience that, to go out into the world without a laptop and try and bring some creativity back into the space and see what happens with it. The computer's a great tool, of course.
Yes.
It can do so many things, but kind of go out, touch, experience, feel the world around you, and then try to figure out what that means in your work.
I mean, that's why I love textiles so much. I spend any time that I ever have off, I'm like, over Thanksgiving, it's almost becomes a different type of job where I'm like, how many shows can I fit in a day? So I could just go and see and soak up as many different things, mediums, film, all of it. It's still, I feel so inspired by all types of kind of design. And, you know, I think about, I was naive, like when I first got my first job, you thought of designers as literally a small studio just doing one type of design. And yes, you know, that's wonderful and that exists, but really, like when you look at that Apple box and you buy that product and it says designed in California, you're like, this is about design. This is about designing product, designing digital experiences, designing stores, designing the typeface, design. It's the whole world, the communications, everything comes under this umbrella of design. And that's why I think that year just opened me up to like, this is such an exciting opportunity, and I will never feel restrained by just one type of design.
That's quite funny, because we had somebody come the other day for an interview, and they asked us, so what will we be doing? Like, what's my role? And we were like, well, we can't really tell you what your role would be. We have to figure that out, because the world of brand is so many different things. You know, maybe it ends up being a book, or ends up being a website, or it ends up being like a multi kind of visceral experience. It's about finding out what fits and going on that journey and figuring out those things. And of course, you'll play a role in that process through some of maybe the skills that you have, where you're better at some things than others. But it's about working with other people, leaning on other people to bring their creativity and the things that they can do together to push forward. And I think that's what's such an exciting space when we talk about brand as well.
Yeah.
You have the next, I did the one.
Oh, do I have the next question?
Yes,
okay.
you have the next.
That leads me nicely on to my next question. So you're obviously used to working with these like very big corporations and on these very big projects, which also brings a lot of different challenges. Where do you kind of prefer to kind of sit?
Yeah.
Because obviously with the bigger projects, more people see, you get more exposure, and with the smaller projects, the possibility isn't as big because of budgets and so.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think kind of for me, it's not, I mean, I still work on probably larger ones and smaller ones, but probably a few people would probably say those smaller ones aren't that small. It might be an innovation for a very large company or something like that. But I think my journey from when I even started at Brown's, which it was a design shop in London, were probably slightly smaller projects in terms of like, we did a lot of publishing, for a lot of paper companies. We'd work with artists, we did annual reports. And by the time I got to like the Victoria and Albert Museum, what I found really exciting about that, and we were only a very small department, 2 senior designers and 2 3D designers designing all the exhibitions, permanent galleries, marketing. And I was like documenting the museum over a year for their report and different types of things. I mean, I loved it because it was very, again, mixed media, which I guess is some of the theme. But what I loved about that work is it started to get viewed by more people. More people experienced the things that we were making and creating when they were coming to visit the museum. It had more reach. And then fast forward, I sort of made the big sort of leap to come to the US, and I started working on hotels and restaurants and things like that. And again, it was things that more people kind of interacted with than, yeah, something that had felt maybe more niche back in the beginning. And then by the time I joined like a Wolf Ollins, where there was an aha moment around brand strategy for me, where like what we were talking about with Burger King, that there was a core sort of idea at the heart of it, like making the design as craveable as the food, where the projects that I was going to get to work on were just going to reach so many more people. And that's where I sort of started to develop more kind of like my own ethos, which I don't think is unique to, I think it's very aligned with why I work at JKR and their ethos around democratizing good design for more people. I needed to be able to do that on a bigger scale. And so when I worked on USA Today, which is sort of the core idea there was Pulse of the Nation, was really something that at the time it was a newspaper free that went to under every hotel door for where Americans were sleeping at night, but then eventually became the sort of biggest digital news platform over the period of time that we worked on the transformation. And yeah, I loved that reach. And the more and more I thought about it, and the years that went by, and Chobani and coming to JKR, it's been like, I go to a supermarket and I'm like appalled by how disgusting everything is, and the opportunity to want to put good design out there, almost aisle by aisle, category by category. And I know that sounds just like, that's just food and beverage. That goes way beyond that. I want to do it by industry, what's happening in healthcare, what's happening in entertainment, what's happening in digital. Like, people deserve good design. It shouldn't come at a cost. And I think Chobani taught me that, was like, why can't you have this cup of beautiful, delicious, nutritious, natural and accessible yogurt for 99 cents? It's more expensive than that now, but like, albeit like something that is good for you, that also looks good. Just because you don't have money, or you don't want to spend your money on better design, it shouldn't be for those reasons. It should be accessible. And so I think my passion and love lies a lot with the things that have more reach and relevancy to more people. It is very complex and hard to do. It takes a longer time. It somewhat suits my personality and my drive and my tenacity, and sort of more we all get to know each other. It's just, it's just the way my journey has led me. And most of the time I'm like, bring it on. The bigger, the more gnarlier, the more challenging, the more political. I am very up for navigating that. I wish it was all as simple as the days when I had the one client who was spending their money and you closely collaborated. But the truth is, no one was really seeing that. And it's not ego. It really is to be able to democratize good design. I feel like I'm in service of doing that.
We have this this thing that we talk about a lot here. It reminds me a lot of that as well, is that we have this idea of like below eye level design. And what that means is above the eye level, especially in Germany, like a lot of branding is very boring. It's very bland. It's very kind of one-dimensional. It's like, this is this, and it tastes like this, so it should be good. Or you buy this because of this, and it's really kind of like 1 + 1 = 2. And like, there's such space for great design and rich, engaging storytelling that is not being absorbed by the mainstream in the way that it should be. And this above the eye level perspective in design means if you look below the billboards, it's where great creativity happens. It's in subcultures. It's in people creating their own art and expression on the walls. It's all of these things that you know, exist, and there's an immense beauty and creativity in it. And there's a whole generation of people craving to have their work represented above the eye level. So all you need to do is
break through. Yeah.
Yeah.
It has to somehow get through. And
because
and
it's
that's
everywhere,
often,
but it's not
yeah.
up there, and it should be.
And that's where all my inspiration comes from. It's often things happening in subcultures, in art and other fashion and all the other things, film and things that really inspire me, and photographers and artists and themes and concepts and ideas and things like that, that actually sort of dragging through, without mimicking and copying by any means. Actually, it's often combining millions and many of these references into some idea that's right for that brand because it reflects who they are, and pummeling it into kind of mainstream culture. You know, like maybe we'll talk about Chobani, but you know, obviously even that had a certain like magic and nostalgicism from different other periods of time, but it was many points of reference, but it was all about telling stories and fairy tales.
Well, we definitely will talk about Chobani,
let's get
into Chobani.
Let's get into it,
because we had no idea what Chobani is.
When we first heard,
yeah,
because we don't have Chobani here in Germany.
Oh, in England as well.
Yeah,
no.
But we did some research, and it's a Greek yogurt brand, right?
Yeah.
And what we also found very interesting is that, I mean, was one of your career steps. And I think you also were on the corporate side at this point. And you also work with Leland Maschmeyer, who's like the co-founder of Collins, and Kwame Tyler Hayford, who is now the D&AD president. And we just asked ourselves, like, is that coincidence that like three kind of really influential people in the design industry worked there at the same time?
Came from great yoga.
What is this place about? What's so special about it?
I mean, we all have slightly different stories, but and we all joined at slightly different times. But to know that Leland was the first person that had to take the leap from leaving Collins to going to Chobani, then he had known Kwame in a past life. He became the next person to come on board, and we'll see. Like Leland is very creatively strategic. Kwame became the managing director, and he was from a really creative production background, so he could make a lot of things happen. I was like the third one to come, the sort of missing will, which was obviously from sort of the actual design side, where Kwame promised me he could make all my dreams come to life of everything, could make and create everything, and he would figure out how to help create the model and the framework of the team and everything would need to be able to happen there. And what was interesting when they were sort of, I met Leland for breakfast, and it was sort of, I didn't know Leland prior or Kwame to working there. I think I was at the point had been at Wolf Olins for 6 coming up to 7 years, and I had always really cared about brand purpose and, like, again, brands that really give a shit in the world, to be honest, and want to actually leave the world a better place, and that their idea of better food for all people in a country where food makes people sick here, because it's you know, I actually only met someone yesterday who said, I didn't feel good for the first 6 months I moved to the US, like how their body was actually just trying to calibrate to the food with all the sort of artificial ingredients and preservatives and things that are put in it. It's very different.
I like to wrap a lot of things in plastic as well. When I was in New York, I was like, should an apple be in plastic? It's like lots of very odd.
Food culture in America is complicated, and it's elitist, which again is another sort of why it's like, you know, just because you have money, you get to buy the better food and feed your family better. So that's not okay. That's not fair. I do not believe in that. And I feel like that was Chobani's mission, founder-led. Hamdi always believed in that kind of better food for all people. Chobani means shepherd. It's kind of the idea of giving the gift of love and nature to the world. He is much more of an activist, fighter spirit. So we talked about fighting for happily ever after became the sort of brand creative idea behind it. It was not just going to be a Greek yogurt company. It wanted to grow into total yogurt, that wanted to grow more into sort of health and wellness, which now it's in oat milk. It has cafes. It's got other experiences, and slowly sort of acquiring sort of other brands in and around the Chobani yogurt brand, which was all, again, a sort of the unlocking of what we've done and how it grew in order to be able to do it. It just was a really interesting challenge, and founder was up for putting design at the heart of the business. And when someone's up for that, that's hard to say no. And Leland and Kwame were both very compelling. And yeah, so we went on this journey, and I think we were together. I think I was there for 2.5 years. I loved it. We built an incredible team. It's very rare that you get to build an A team. Like, unless you're starting your own agency, it's like I didn't fill it with like the normal types of designers I would have filled it with. I filled it with kind of misfits. We were a group of misfits together.
Nice.
Passionate geeks about type.
Ragtag.
Illustrators that painted the fruits on the packaging. None of us had come from formal pack, which was that was the product. So we were going to have to do that piece, but we were doing obviously a whole lot more. And I got to build a comms team, and I loved making film and activations and experiences. I'm not an advertising creative. I don't profess to be. I love it. I'm a maker. An art director, so I could very heavily lean in it, but I needed other superpowers. So I picked poets and people who wrote poems down the sides of packaging and things like that. And we were successful at some of it. We failed at some of it. It was the most incredible experience. But this idea of fighting for happily ever after is the thing that we rallied around, and we told stories of happily ever after. So the typography, the illustrations, it was all the idea of building Eden 2.0, where you could go to a garden, like secret garden, and it would be like you want to pick the apple, and it would be delicious, and we would all be, it was very optimistic and very magic fairy dust, Kodachrome photography that would made food look so rich and beautiful and mouth-watering. It was awesome to build and be really dedicated in a certain amount of time to one brand where you can affect absolutely everything. So I love that.
It's not fair. It's not fair that it's only in America, or it's not available here anyway.
Yeah, it's growing. It's in Australia and APAC and more that type of the world. I'm sure it will over time.
I'll get to taste them at some point. But also that ties nicely into the next question, which is about the different scenes in the different countries. You talked about how food is perceived, and you touch on some cultural points as well there. You're very much in the design scene, so you know people, you know how it's going over there. What are the cultural differences in design and how design is perceived, and the scene itself, where you are in comparison to, let's say, Europe or the UK?
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, I not to belabor, but design is loved in the UK and in Europe. Design has been, from the Bauhaus movement, before, after, and there's a higher level of sophistication in culture around good design. When I worked at Brown's, I also fell in love with lecture set books and all of those types of things. And I got to do a trip to the States, and it was just the Americana of like slab serifs and Rockwells and Clarendons and some of the typography and things that had existed here. And it's so rough around the edges as well. I mean, New York looks beaten up most of the time. It's not perfect, and definitely not like the underground system in London now. It's the subway, you're going to see 100 rats just getting on it for 1 second. It's a little, it's definitely gritty. And then you go outside of New York, and like it's a whole nother world as well. Like LA has the California, and and Florida and Miami has another design language. I mean, I'd never been anywhere where all the buildings are painted pink and blue and things like that.
Right? Yeah,
it's like it's mad. And then you have a lot of nothing as well, which is like a bit sad and or more industrial. I mean, again, you seem to find beauty and interesting things in every kind of city or town in some ways, but it's just not the same, historically, the same level of sophistication. In terms of design and culture, I felt like in London, it wasn't as competitive. A lot of the agencies, we'd all go and drink in the same pubs on a Friday night. Like Browns were hanging out with C and MB Studios and Tom Hingston and all of, like, there was a whole era where it was super kind of close and there was enough work to go around. There's enough talent. Often everyone would maybe move every few years and you just all move around in the sort of same circles. Here it's a lot more competitive, and it's a bit sad. I feel very sad that there isn't a design culture per se that I felt or I feel nostalgic for. That honestly also like organizations like D&AD were driving at the time. They were doing speaker series. It was places where you would show up on a monthly thing, so you get to see and meet more people, and it was more networking. That art, don't get me wrong, I One Club and art directors and D&AD even over here, and I know Brian puts on speaker series from Collins and things like that. But it's much bigger, it's much more spread out, and it is much more competitive.
Yeah, I also believe as well, like, if we really want to make like a change and a difference, we cannot all individually just all go for the same thing and individually be self-reflective. I think if we really want to change things, we have to change things together. And I feel like whether you're a big studio or a small studio, we have a responsibility to make the scene and the space a desirable place for young creatives to actually come to, because it's a scary place, and especially now as well. And we need to fly the flag, not just for like commercial gain and getting the right clients and getting any kind of prestige or whatever. We have a responsibility, you know, as a like to represent design and brand in our industry, to move forward, to continue to evolve, and to continue the things that we're setting in motion at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, that's why when I was asked to sit on the trustee board of D&AD, I wholeheartedly wanted to be part of that, because again, when I think about programs, whether it's New Blood or Shift, and thinking about what the next generation is doing, and I mean, it's so hard for that next generation right now, because most of them worked isolated at home during COVID, didn't have the college experiences a lot of us haven't had the first job experiences. Most of them don't want to even come to a studio because they've had years now working at home, but they're not learning. So then they're not engaged eventually, and then they leave eventually. And I've seen it here, even at JKR, and it's no fault of anyone's not wanting to try, but it's time to come back to the office, and it's time to go through those barriers of not wanting to work isolated versus not isolated. It's time for the industry to put their arms around the next generation, because they've slipped. They're nowhere to be seen right now, and we have to get hold of them and bring them in and have fun and make stuff together and reignite that, because it's a bit damaged. Our design legacy from the whole industry is damaged at the moment, and I'm generally concerned, and I see pockets of awesomeness, of course, when I go to New Blood or Shift, where renewed faith, but then I'm seeing it only in the studio, where we're only like talking about people coming back more in a formal way next year on a rotating basis of a number of days per week and things like that, because we need to get more of the younger creatives in the studio, and it's the only way to do it, and it's the best way to learn.
We noticed that too, and we think it's difficult nowadays for a younger generation also to imagine like what is this job actually look like in 5 years or maybe even 1 year. It's already difficult. So also to wrap it up, do you have any like advice for young people who actually thinking about getting into the industry and starting a career in design and creative?
Yeah. I mean, I think my first is always like, doesn't matter where you start in it, like start wherever there's an opportunity in front of you. I think, I mean, even I started working in 2000 when it was a recession. I wrote hundreds of letters back then. It was a different way of obviously looking for work at that point. And by getting my first piece of work experience, then I met someone that introduced me to someone that you just got to get a foot in the door. So don't be elitist or a snob about it. Yes, it would be awesome to work at something you aspire to work on, but you're going to have to go on those journeys, those steps, and meet people and get in. The next thing is always what my mum told me: make yourself indispensable. Show up as much as you don't want to. It might feel really hard. I really do have empathy if you've been working isolated in a bedroom at home all through college. Just don't. You got to go in. You got to start mixing. Go in 1 day a week, then go 2. Like build up to it. But trust me, if you make yourself more indispensable, more people see you, more you're volunteering to be on projects or help others. The amount of people I see are just in their own space and literally pack up and have done in their own world, but don't turn to their sort of neighbor and go, what are you working on? Do you need any help? Are you going to be here late? Can I help you out? I was always helping other people out. Actually, I saw somebody wrote on my LinkedIn the other day about something, and they were like, I remember you in your first job, and you stayed and did 2 all-nighters with me on jobs that weren't even your job. And that always told me the person you were like. And I was like, did I? Oh my God. I am telling you, other people, not do all-nighters, please don't. But help, like volunteer, be willing to kind of like help. And that's the way you're going to learn. And don't be afraid of making mistakes. You're not going to get punished for any of those. I made so many mistakes, and they were costly back in the days on like printing plates and all sorts of things. Like you got to just show up and partake and use the tools, celebrate them. Like AI is here to stay. It's part of the tools that we're going to use. You know, Figma's right for some things, Adobe's right for that. I'm really struggling to know what tool everyone should use for what, but it's like I think you need to use them all for different types of things. They're tools to make your ideas. It doesn't matter. Make.
Cool. Thank you.
It's great advice. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That was passionate, personal, insightful, and incredibly entertaining. Thank you so much for sharing those moments with us, and hopefully inspiring you guys as well. I'd just like to say thank you to Lisa once more for joining us.
Thank you.
And if you haven't, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, like the video. And if you know anybody who is coming through in the industry and needs some advice, or anybody who just loves brand, share this video, and hopefully we can help to make a little bit of a difference and a change. Yeah. So that just leaves one last thing, is to say thank you very much for tuning in, and we will see you in the next one. Peace.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Lisa. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Awesome.
Oh, thank you so much. That was really cool.
We did it twice.
We did it. You know, after the first thing when I was introducing it again, I was a bit like, it felt really wooden. I was got into it. But then the rhythm was in, and it was like, yeah. Perfect.